Welcome to Paradelphia Radio. This is Rick Pruitt once again here in the Wildfire Studios.
Yeah.
So tonight we have a couple of interviews that we are going to be presenting for your listening pleasure.
Absolutely.
In the second hour, I'm going to introduce these backwards here because Doug has all the information on the second interview, which is going to actually be the first one.
Second. Yeah.
Follow along. The second hour, we're going to be talking to, or playing, I should say, a recording of an interview I did over the weekend with a lady by the name of Stasha Eriksen. Stasha wrote a book all about the Mandela effect. Now, the Mandela effect, if you remember, this was something we brought up maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
I think it ended up turning into an entire show.
Yeah, and people lost their mind during this show. We kind of did it on a whim. We took like I don't know, a half hour, 45 minutes.
Well, it was a show where we focused on the Mandela effect and something else, and again, it just blew up from there.
And basically, what this is well, actually, nobody really knows what it is, but the premise behind it is that the world has changed from what people remember.
Right.
What I mean by that is small things have, like for example, the one that everybody brings up is the Bernstein Bears.
Yes.
The spelling of the Bernstein Bears.
Yes. Oh, I remember that conversation. That still drives me nuts.
That is one that comes up all the time because apparently the Bernstein Bears now is spelled with an AI.
Right.
Bernstein, like a stain on your shirt.
Yes.
And what everybody remembers from back in the day is Steen, kind of like a Jewish name.
Oh, yeah.
Stein.
Or
German. Is it Jewish or German? I don't know. Whatever.
But
Point is, Stein.
And it's crazy because I think with that on the Bernstein Bears or Stein Bears or whatever, they there was even something as far as however you viewed it or how you saw it, like classified you as being insane or something like that. I don't know, something along that. But
there's a lot of different examples of this. People that are alive now that people. Well, that's where the Mandela effect name came from. Is people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison back in the 1980s.
Yep.
And lo and behold, he didn't die until about 4 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Wow. It was because he was released in 1990.
Yeah.
And ended up living to be 95 years old.
And he became president of South Africa. And a lot of people remember him dying in prison and his wife, Winnie Mandela, becoming president of South Africa.
Right.
That's what everybody remembers.
But
yeah, that struck a bell, didn't it? Because that's what I remember.
Yeah.
Lo and behold.
It's just like it wasn't all that long ago that everyone thought Sinbad, and I swear I saw this movie.
The genie. We talked about that. Yeah.
That Sinbad, the actor, was in a a movie where he was a genie.
Right.
And I mean, this blew up on like Facebook and Instagram. And even Sinbad was like, I was never in a movie about a genie. And I swear I saw him in a movie.
Well, didn't I see something online where they actually have the VHS movie cover of that?
I think someone.
Yes,
I think someone created that.
Yeah.
But,
is that right?
But yeah, just another prime example. Like every so often, and even today, these things come up, and it is insane. And when you don't think of it until you think of it, where it comes up, you know.
I'm out here.
Oh. That's because I wanted to be in control. All right, everyone.
Testing.
There we go.
We're back. So, anyway. So the Mandela effect, and Stasha has some ones that are going to blow your mind. Like we talked about the ones that are kind of the ones you hear all the time.
The normal ones. Yeah.
Rick's.
Anyway, I'll finish what your sentence is while your mic is. But yeah. We focused on a lot of, in a sense, normal, not normal, but things that are everyday ones. Like you said, there was another one with
cereal,
the peanut butter. Peanut butter or something. Jiffy or Jif or something. Yeah, and
peanut butter.
There was. I actually just saw one recently on Facebook, which was the. From Star Wars, I'm having a blank of his name, with having a silver leg
Darth
versus
Vader?
Not Darth,
C-3PO.
C-3PO, yeah.
We talk about that in the interview.
So things that you may have seen in the past that are like, oh wait,
but she has brought up ones in this book that are one will blow your mind, Jen.
Oh, I'm listening.
I don't want to even tell you about this because it is biblical.
Oh wow.
It is religious. And I'm not a religious person,
yes.
but it is something so basic to religion, to the Christian religion, that it blew my mind.
Oh yeah,
when I heard about this.
That's
Wait,
why.
need to
So I want to hear
Yeah.
you listen. I want to see
Okay.
you listen to this interview and hear and see your reaction to this.
Right.
So there's some stuff. There's stuff geographically in the world that are different. That is different. It's wild. So
Yeah,
this,
I've been looking forward to this because she's from overseas.
She
too.
lives in Norway.
Okay, so yeah,
Well, part of the year. She lives here in L.A.
Okay.
or California. I'm not sure it's L.A., but it's out in California. Her husband is in Norway, so she kind of travels back and forth.
Gotcha.
And I did the interview last weekend because she was in Norway, and the time difference is like 7 hours.
You
So
should
right-
have just taken a little vacation there. I
Yeah.
mean,
So right now it's like 2 a.m. out there. So.
Right. Yeah. So.
So now the actual that's gonna be in the second. We have a jam-packed show, like we mentioned at the
Yes.
beginning of the hour. So we're going to jump right from the interview we just did with Pam and Tyler into the recorded interview I did over the weekend with a lady by the name of Stasha Eriksen.
Mm-hmm.
She is an author who has written a book called The Mandela Effect. And that book is available. She'll talk about this at the end of the interview, but it's available on Kindle, and you guys can download that or order the hard copy. But the download's cool because the things that she talks about in this interview, some of the items, you can actually go if you get the downloaded version. There's links that actually come through the downloaded version of the book.
Oh.
So as you're reading the book, there'll be a link to something she's talking about, and you can click the link. And you can literally see what it is she's referring to.
Oh wow! Why did they have that stuff when I did book reports in high school and everything? But no, that's awesome. Wow.
So it's pretty cool. So we're going to go now to the interview with Stasha Eriksen about the Mandela effect. Get ready to have your mind blown, people. We'll be back. All right, joining me today on Paradelphia, we have a very special guest from what I believe is the farthest reaches that I've ever done an interview. From the great country of Norway, we have we have Miss Stasha Eriksen. She is a biblical scholar. She is an author. She is an animal activist. She is also a spiritual teacher. And what we're going to be talking about today, she has done some extensive research on the Mandela effect. Stasha, welcome to Paradelphia.
Thank you so much for the invite, Rick. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm just so excited that you were interested in the book. You know, it's a big phenomenon. I never know how it's going to be absorbed, so I really appreciate you checking it out and contacting me.
Yeah, well, this is a. I think when we talked earlier, I told you this was a show that we didn't really do a show on the Mandela effect as a whole, or if we did, it was like a partial show. But whatever it was we did, it got one of the biggest reactions from our audience that we've ever had. We had people emailing us after the show saying, "Oh my God, I remember this. I don't remember this. You're crazy. You're not crazy."
Right.
So it's all. I imagine you get the same thing.
Welcome to my life.
So I guess to start off with, you're pretty active in the YouTube community, but this was kind of a departure for you. What got you into the Mandela effect, and as far as wanting to research it?
Well, how it really started was, like you mentioned, I've been a biblical scholar since around the year 2011. I had a really big spiritual awakening, and I'd been a little bit kind of New Age before that, a little Buddhist before that, and was just trying to find myself. And as soon as I had the spiritual awakening, I decided to really start studying the Bible and spirituality. And I'm definitely not your average Christian by any means. I'm more of a historical scholar, if anything. But through my journey of studies, I started to make YouTube videos just about the things that I would learn in school. And then I started kind of bridging the gap between not just learning and teaching, but also praying for people and healing people. So I started making YouTube videos about 5 to 7 years ago, and just started a channel really based on just healing, spirituality, religion, possibly the lies about religion, the truth about religion. And then I've been doing this for multiple years, covering conspiracy theories, everything you could possibly imagine. And then one day I had a client send me an email, and this email was all about something known as the Mandela effect. And I get a lot of emails. I mean, I get like thousands of emails sometimes within a day on various topics. But this one really struck a chord with me because it came from a very reputable person that I'd known for a really long time. And essentially what had happened was he had gone to a museum with his wife and his daughter, and they had an art exhibit. And with the art exhibit, they were showing, cartoons from history and things of that nature. And one of the main features of this exhibit was the Berenstain Bears exhibit. Remember the famous children's books.
Right.
And so he was there and he was looking at the books, and then he was just totally flabbergasted when he looked closer at the display and realized the Berenstain Bear spelling had changed drastically. It was always kind of spelled like Stein, and now it has been spelled stain, like a stain on your clothing. Mm-hmm. So for him, that was just kind of the tip of the iceberg for him. So he went to the internet and just typed it in to see if he was the only person that kind of noticed this change. And then he just landed on a treasure trove of every Mandela effect under the sun. So he sent it my way and he just said, I don't know if this is something where I'm going crazy or if thousands of people are misremembering things, but there's definitely something going on, and something has driven me to bring this to your attention. And can you please, oh please, just make one video about it and see what the world thinks.
Right.
So essentially, I made my first video on September 3rd of 2016, just a little over a year ago. And I just kind of touched on a lot of these little very basic Mandela effects that I had heard about. And the video got so much attention that it essentially has become a full-time job for me for about a year straight now, where I am doing nothing but studying and researching Mandela effects. And it started with the Berenstain Bears, and it's just gone way beyond that at this point, that I ended up having to write a 350-page book on Amazon about it, and I've only just tipped the iceberg after 350 pages. So it's something really crazy how I kind of ended up here.
Yeah. Now, just to be clear, I mean, people have probably heard of this if they've heard our show, but just to be clear, can you give a brief description of what exactly it is that we're talking about here as far as the Mandela effect?
Yeah, essentially what the Mandela effect is a symptom that reality as we know it has changed. And it's not just physical reality, but it's also spiritual, it's emotional. It's this overall change in life as we know it, and particularly things like history, people's names, you name it, just very, very, memorable moments from pop culture, such as movie lines and movie quotes, that suddenly, somehow, within the past 10 years or so, some of these most iconic moments that we all remember have changed significantly. And it can be, again, a physical change, a change in spelling. It could be a literal change of, a whole continent shifting in location. Mm-hmm. And it gets even deeper than that, to where many people now believe that we've actually even switched positions within the Milky Way galaxy itself.
Wow. So
it's a pretty big deal. And I would just say overall, it really is a symptom that reality as we know it is changing.
Now, at the end of the interview, we'll go through some of the specific examples here as we go along. And toward the end, I want to get your thoughts on your theories for what is happening. But in general, one of the things I noticed in the book, the way you worded things in the book, you said that our history has been manipulated. And to me, that sounds like you're insinuating that it is something that has been done deliberately. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, well, and it can be looked at two different ways, because it could be that all of our life we've been kind of looking at the world through one lens. And now if there is some type of actual massive spiritual or planetary or parallel reality, if you will, or multiverse change happening, what we could be seeing, what the Mandela effect itself could be, is actually revealing the truth of how our history and humanity and how everything has been all along. And maybe it's something supernatural, kind of erasing whatever could have been done to our past on purpose, if you know what I mean.
Right.
I feel like we have been manipulated for as long as most of us anyway have been alive, and perhaps now that the world in the collective consciousness is awakening to the fact that the world around us is changing. I kind of look at the Mandela effect as like really hidden truths now getting shoved up to the surface.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a twofold thing, you know, who manipulated it? Why is it a manipulation, or are we now just finally opening our eyes to how things have always been?
Right. Now, one of the things that I wonder about in this, like you mentioned a minute ago, how this has been over the last 10 or 12 years or so that these changes seem to have been happening. Is there any kind of historical context for this? In other words, is there any kind of research you've come across that shows that this has happened repeatedly throughout history, whereas someone in the 1840s maybe came up with a similar theory that somehow 10 years prior to that things were different for them? Anything like that?
Wow, that's that's like a really great question. No one has ever asked me that before. Well, I have not been able to stumble upon anyone in the past who had located this research prior to the initial woman who is getting credit for coining the term. There's a woman by the name of Fiona Broome who has technically been given credit for coining the actual term, the Mandela effect. And so it's just kind of hard to say, because when you look behind Fiona's research, it's really hard to say that, you know, because that name Mandela effect did not really exist before she discovered it, which was in 2009.
Right.
And prior to that, I really, there's a few people that have emailed me and said, oh, no, it wasn't Fiona. Someone else, you know, discovered it before her, et cetera, et cetera. But regardless, the farthest back that I can see this research beginning, or some people call it reality shift, or, you know, different terms, but I really can't see this research starting from more than 10 years ago. So I really do believe that something significant shifted within the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, because I know that when people look into your book and into the research, they're going to bring up this fact. So I'm not trying to like poo-poo anything, but I am going to just address it because it's probably going to be something people bring up. When you in your book,
Sure.
the resources that you use in your book are oftentimes people who have done research themselves, and they have posted things under screen names and things like that on YouTube. So.
Yes.
With this already being a topic that many people are going to look at, you know, and roll their eyes to begin with, now we're in a position where we're looking at your book, and your resources are basically people that are not giving their full name, they're giving a screen name. It seems very much like something people could just make up and then kind of go hide behind the screen name. Have you come across any kind of criticism for that, and what would you say to people that had that opinion?
Well, that's a really good point. Well, I think originally why I ended up really actually including all of the people's comments in there kind of started with me sharing Fiona's story, because for me to really explain to people where the Mandela effect came from, I had to find out where it started. And for those people listening who don't know why it's called the Mandela effect, how it started was that Fiona Broome had a very, very significant memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. She remembered witnessing his funeral on television, and various other things, like the children from school had to wear black ribbons on this day. Every day they would, you know, kind of re-celebrate the death of Nelson. And then one day she was sitting in her sitting room and she saw him on television, and suddenly he was the president. So she had this moment of, oh my God, what the heck is going on here? I thought this guy died, 20 years ago. So she had already had a paranormal kind of blog where she would just, type up different, phenomenon, paranormal things that came up. And she just kind of put this post up out as like a shot in the dark to say, hey, does anybody else kind of remember Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s? And so when I started reading the original blog and everybody's legitimate comments, which again, this was back in 2009, this was just all real people. And again, they just had kind of screen names, but these were people that their stories were like insane. So then I thought, wow, well, if this is how Fiona really got some more people to kind of back up her own memories, is to reach out to others, then perhaps I'll open up the YouTube comment section on my videos and allow people to express themselves in the same way. So a lot of the first comments, that I got, they're basically just people's YouTube screen names. And I believe some people do that for anonymity's sake, because this is a very sensitive topic and it is kind of scary for a lot of people. But what I do is that I don't take what people's comments on YouTube are and take that as my research. What I do is I take that as kind of like a breadcrumb. And so if, let's say, Zyra Moon or Yarik734 sends me a clue, I don't take his word for it. I go straight into research mode. So I kind of wanted to include everybody's comments and then also allow people to see that this isn't just something that I came up with. All of these videos are still present on my YouTube channel, so people can go and actually see the comments that I have in the book are still on YouTube. So it's really kind of, without this community, I don't know that I would have had as much research come across my path. But I never just take, someone's screen named, kind of breadcrumb for face value. I take it as a clue, and if it resonates with me, then I kind of go on the research hunt.
Yeah.
So I include those comments just to give some realism for people, so they can see that this isn't just something I'm making up out of my head. But then I also follow that with, pages and pages and pages of research from medical journals, from NASA websites, from good old Wikipedia, and everywhere else under the sun that you can kind of, back things up. So it starts with a little breadcrumb from an anonymous source, but it always leads me to a real research-based, credible source.
Yeah.
So hopefully that explains a little why I included the YouTube comments and stuff in the book as well.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to poo-poo the research. I'm just, because these are things that people are going to look at, and everyone tries to always find, in this field, I'm sure everyone tries to find anything to invalidate the research. So,
yes.
That's something that I can imagine when people read the book, they're going to look at it and go, well, but if what you're saying here is that you just use these as kind of a starting point and then dig into your own research, that's completely understandable.
Yeah, that was the easiest way for me to do it, because beyond my one client sending me the first email with his breadcrumb, I didn't really know who else to trust, or if it was just going to be me and this one other person, remembering that Berenstain was never spelt like a stain on your clothing, because I remembered that too. I don't ever remember it being spelled like a stain on my clothing. And I did read those books a lot when I was a kid. I'm 39 now, so that was the era back in the mid 80s where we were reading these books.
Right.
So it really just took the whole Mandela effect community, and it took all of these other people testing their memories really to help me kind of validate it a little bit also for myself. And then when I would start digging into the actual research, and I got real heavy into research, I mean, almost the entire book is nothing but research. My mind just was blown. It became so undeniable to me after the first top 10 things that I'd heard that it really has become a full-time research project, almost like a full-time job for me. And every day, every single day, I still have people emailing me with new effects, to the point where I have emails from like 6-7 months ago that I still don't even have a chance to open yet, because there's so many of them at this point.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to bring awareness to the fact that reality was changing. They can call it Mandela effect. They can call it reality shift. But there's definitely something going on here.
Yeah. So now let's get into some of the fun stuff here. Let's get into some of the examples of what's going on. Now, you gave us the Bernstein Bears one, which I agree with. I've looked into that one. That was probably one of the first ones I saw, too. And I'm in your camp, where I think that is different than what I remember as a child. But you have a whole lot of different things in this book that you go over in many different areas. One of them that seemed the most interesting, and you alluded to it a minute ago, was the geographical changes around us. Can you speak to a couple of those that you came across?
Yes, the geography changes were so crazy that I'm actually having to write a whole second volume for volume 2 of this book, where I just get straight into geography changes themselves. Many people have noticed significant shifts in our world map. Now, what many people actually don't realize is that we do not even own, it does not even exist, not one single photo of the Earth itself. The only images that you can find on the internet are literal CGI representations. We don't have a photo of planet Earth, which is a little bit disturbing. So when I started to look at all these different maps, people started to say to me, Stasha, this continent has moved, this continent has changed. And then I tried to do the research myself. I realized that, first of all, I couldn't even find an actual photograph of the Earth at all. So that made me start to think, okay, wait a minute, this is really, really strange. Now, the main geographic map changes that come up over and over again, that come my way every day, number one is the position of Australia. Now, where Australia is located now, I believe it's to the east of New Zealand, and now everybody is kind of saying, no, I remember it being to the west, or vice versa. It changes. A lot of people tell me they look one day on a map and it'll change.
Right.
But Australia changing position was a really big one. And then what was really strange about Australia changing position is that I even asked some people from Australia. I have clients all over the world, and many of them started looking at the map and saying, oh my goodness, I thought we were on the left versus the right, or the right versus the left, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the exact time I was doing this research, suddenly science had discovered this new continent that just popped up out of nowhere, which they've called Zealandia. And it was actually trending on Google this morning. And buried right below the water between like New Zealand and Australia, there's now a new continent that has now been confirmed and is slowly rising up, which is called Zealandia. And this is really true. People can go Google it right now. So Zealandia was crazy that suddenly we have a new continent.
Yeah, I did see that. I saw that it was something about that on. Yeah, you're right. It was on the news last night or this morning or something. I didn't read the story, but I did see something about that. That's interesting.
And then what's funny is that because that research actually started about a year ago, but suddenly it's making mainstream news.
Right.
Now, another really big one, and because I'm up here, I'm a native Californian, but my husband's Norwegian, so I'm up in Norway half of the year. A lot of people have been coming to me particularly about the North Pole. They're like, hey, remember the North Pole and how we used to have this huge polar ice cap at the top of our globe? Well, look at it now. It no longer exists. And so I thought, you got to be kidding me. Well, where does Santa Claus live then, right? So I looked it up, and we no longer have any type of ice cap at all whatsoever at the north of our globe. Now, I did some research on that, and apparently in 2013, there was some science articles that said, oh, humans are so destructive to the Earth that they have now melted the polar ice cap. And so apparently this was announced in 2013, but nobody seems to remember ever hearing about this story. Most people that I know have no recollection of the North Pole ice cap not existing. Unless you're really deep into this research, everybody thinks we still have a North Pole.
Well,
and it's gone.
Wouldn't that speak to global warming? Isn't that what everybody keeps saying about global warming, is that we're losing ice rapidly on both poles, actually, but specifically the North Pole?
And that's particularly how the media will spin it, yes. But for a polar ice cap of that magnitude to just simply melt really quickly and not like break up into a bunch of small pieces and slowly break apart, which is actually currently happening down in Antarctica right now. There's chunks that are ice cap chunks that are breaking off and icebergs are breaking off, but it's a really long process. Mm-hmm. And for that much water to basically melt, I mean, we would be flooded. I mean, several countries, especially in Scandinavia, would be completely underwater if that were to be true.
Right.
So those are some of the bigger ones. There's some other ones I'm not fully convinced on or not, but there are a lot of people that have found maps of, you know, the small little island of Sicily. It used to be kind of away from the country of France. It used to look like France was a boot and it was kicking Sicily away, but they were never ever touching. Now, if you look on the maps, you will see that Sicily is literally almost practically touching France completely. When I was a kid and I learned geography, the way that we would remember maps as our teacher is don't forget the boot is kicking the ball. And that's how we'd remember that there was this big gap between Sicily and France. But that is also no longer there. Oh, there's so many more that we could go on about maps forever, but I'd say those are kind of like mostly the biggest ones that have come across my path as far as geography changes go. But there's a lot more. There's a lot more.
Yeah. Now one of the ones, one of the topics I should say that kind of resonates with people the most, that we got a lot of feedback on when we did that show before, was like pop culture type things. And one of the ones that drives me crazy, because I specifically know, I've had arguments with friends of mine who are big Star Wars geeks, and the whole issue over two things. Number one, C-3PO's silver leg. I'm sure you've heard that one. And and the Darth Vader quote when he says, "Luke, I'm your father."
Yes. Well, for those who don't know what he's talking about here is that C-3PO. In fact, I just made a video about this on my YouTube channel 2 weeks ago, and at the end, I can tell everyone my website, and they can just find my YouTube channel and check out some of this research that I've done.
Yeah.
But C-3PO. Of course, you know, most of us always remember C-3PO, the robot from Star Wars, and we always remember him being a fully gold robot. Is that how you remember him?
Yes.
For gold from head to toe, right?
Right.
And now suddenly there is one silver leg on C-3PO, and I believe it's his left leg. It's actually not even his whole leg, but it's just his thigh, like his from the knee down.
Right, right.
And that is now I found some residual evidence of all gold C-3PO still existing, but suddenly now if you ask anybody or if you start digging into the C-3PO not being all gold thing, suddenly there's all of these people that say, no, he always had a silver leg. Yeah. And then they have these long, really detailed explanations as to why. And when it gets that detailed, I start thinking, okay, somebody's trying to do like some counterattack here, because I know C-3PO was always completely gold.
Now, the way I remember,
you know what I'm saying?
The way I remember the story, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but in one of the previous Star Wars movies, I believe he was like scrapped for parts or something like that. Like something happened to C-3PO physically where he was taken apart by someone for some reason. I can't remember the whole story. And then when he appeared again in the next movie, he had this silver leg, and I remember seeing it in the movie and thinking, oh, they must have just done that like his version of a scar, you know, from this trauma he went through. They couldn't find a gold leg, so he now has a silver leg, and that was kind of his like battle scar from whatever happened in the previous movie.
Yes, and that's the main argument that I get from Star Wars fans, because even when I did this video a couple weeks ago, there's still such a big debate about this one, and I was like, please, if you are a Star Wars nerd, I really want to hear from you, because you know how people are about Star Wars.
Oh,
they really, if you're
friends
a fan,
that are like that, yeah.
Yeah, you know everything. And so I got a lot of great feedback, even from really big Star Wars fans. And yes, there was one of the many episodes of Star Wars where some of his parts got switched out, and for a short time he had a silver leg. But it certainly was not across the board in every movie, in every depiction, in all the merchandising, all the t-shirts, the dolls, everything. If it was such a big deal, wouldn't they all have the silver leg? It was a very insignificant moment, I believe, in C-3PO's history. So then why is that now almost the only depiction you can find? I mean, people can just go type in C-3PO and you will see the difference. You might find a few all gold ones, but the majority now, everywhere we look, he has this one silver leg.
Yeah,
and that's very odd.
Yeah, and that's something that, you know, of all these different things, there's a couple of them that really, really resonate with me, and that's one of them. I'm not one of these people that, like, lived and died with Star Wars, but you can't, gun to my head, you can't tell me I didn't know what C-3PO looked like as a boy growing up in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was just kind of a basic thing.
Exactly. And, Jim Harold, who was interviewing not so long ago from the Paranormal Podcast, he said the exact same thing. He said that if someone bet him $1,000 prior to knowing about this change, that he would have absolutely said he was completely gold from head to toe.
Yeah.
And these are people that are researching stuff all the time. These are all credible people. So, that to me, you can't tell me he was any other thing but all gold. I think it's really strange. Now, I did have one really amazing comment on that YouTube video because I'm a biblical scholar. I'm always trying to look at these things also from a spiritual nature. And this image of gold and the story in the Old Testament of Aaron and the golden calf came to mind when I was in the middle of my video. And I just kind of vaguely said it. There's this whole, moment back before the Exodus or around that time where people started, instead of worshiping God, they started worshiping this golden idol. And it happened to be a golden calf. And so what was really strange is I felt that I said, I wonder if this is like a deeper meaning, something to do with gold. And those gold rush people, they get like that gold curse. And there's just something really strange about gold to me. Right. And then I didn't even put two and two together until somebody in the comments said, Stasha, you just said it. It's right in front of your face. His golden calf changed.
Yeah.
And I went,
yeah. Look at that.
Whoa, because the calf is the lower part of the leg. So anyone who's listening that knows the deeper meaning of the golden calf and all this, I'm starting to think it might be something positive. If it is something symbolic, perhaps that means the end of this really greedy gold standard type of world that we live in, and maybe back to the old school days like the Iron Age. Because now it's an I don't know if it's silver. I think it's technically an iron leg is what he's supposed to have now.
Yeah.
But the other one you mentioned about good old Luke and his father. Now, if people don't know about that, as we all remember as watching, it's the most iconic scene from Star Wars, is the moment when Darth Vader is standing out on the platform and he's there with Luke Skywalker and he tells him, Luke, I am your father.
Right.
And now you go back and you watch the movie and it just simply says, no, I am your father. And even the whole delivery of James Earl Jones' speech, from the way I remember him saying, Luke, I am your father, it was more calm and there was a pause in between. Now it's this very angry, no, I am your father. So that one too, woo-wee, has that blown up the internet. If more people could go back and check out that, Star Wars episode and see that he never said, Luke, I'm your father. Are you crazy? Of course he did.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm on that boat too.
So that one's really iconic, and if you do a little research, you'll see how many T-shirts, how many different types of memorabilia, coffee mugs, everything under the sun with those quotes, Luke, I am your father, you can find on the internet. So have we all just totally misremembered that movie? Are all the people who made merchandise and T-shirts, were they all wrong too? There's too many of them now to be undenied. You know what I'm saying?
Now, one of the other ones we got a lot of feedback on when we did that show, we talked about the end of the Queen song, We Are the Champions.
Oh, yes.
Where at the very end of that song, the last lyric is "of the world." They say it at the very, very end of that song, and yet we debated it on the show, and then we went to a break after we talked about it, and we played the song, and at the end of the song, it was not there, which blew my mind.
Oh, I know, and it blew mine too. And what was even funnier, because we always remember, we are the champion, no time for losers. And once he's done with the whole verse, it ends with, of the world.
Right.
It's like this real kind of pause, but then you always wait for that, of the world. It's almost off, even when that part is there in the original version.
Right.
So when I heard that disappeared, that really freaked me out. But what was even stranger was about 2 or 3 days after that Mandela effect crossed my path, I was watching YouTube and this suggested video just kind of popped up into my feed. And it was that the late night talk show host, James Corden, the British guy who now lives in the United States and has a late night show. Mm-hmm. He does these things called car karaoke, where carpool karaoke, where he picks up a celebrity and he drives them around in his car, and they sing to different songs while driving in his car, and he's driving to work.
Right.
Well, one particular episode just pops up on my feed, and in the front seat is James Corden sitting with Gwen Stefani, and then in the back seat it is Julia Roberts and George Clooney. Okay, so 4 pretty well-known, pretty reputable celebrities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So James chooses "We Are the Champions," and they're singing it, and they're singing it, and they're all singing it, and then when it starts to get to the end, all of them are waiting for the moment to say "of the world," and several of them start to kind of say it, and they all look at each other, and it's not there, and George Clooney literally looks like he's seen a ghost and goes, wait a minute, where did it go? This isn't right. And Gwen Stefani too, she's a vocalist. She was like, wait a minute, what? And James Corden has said, have we been lied to? Have we been wrong all this time? Did the song just stop too quickly? And I think they even played it back just to be safe. And literally to see their expressions live on TV just blew my mind, and the synchronicity of me just finding out about it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not just me and a couple of YouTubers or some lady on the internet. It's spreading like wildfire.
Yeah.
And it's so many things now that it's like getting comical to me.
Now, one of the things that you got into that I had not heard of until I read your book, was a couple of different biblical issues when it comes to Mandela effect. One of the ones that completely blew my. This is one of the remember I told you there were 4 or 5 that I really have that really resonate. The one about the Lord's Prayer. Now, I'm not a religious person, but we were of the church going sense when I was a kid. So you heard that over and over and over and over again. And I know, I absolutely know that was different than what you're describing. It is now in the book.
Yes. Well, I'll go ahead and share it with everybody then, because that one really floored me as well, particularly doing the fact that I'm in a biblical studies major right now. So as most people, and I will assume, and then again, when I say these things, I assume most people listening to this show might be of the open mind category, which means that most of us remember things how it used to be. And the Lord's Prayer, and as I always knew it, was, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And it goes on and on and on from there.
Right.
Now, the main thing that has changed now, when you go to particularly the King James Bible, which has honestly become like my new nemesis, because I have found so many things wrong with it and so many errors, and I believe they have been, manipulated on purpose.
Right.
So if you go to the good old King James Bible now and you read the Lord's Prayer, rather than saying, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, it says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Yeah. Debts as in financial debts.
Right.
Now, I'm sorry, but what in the actual heck would money have to do with the Lord's Prayer?
Yeah, that completely. I read that and I'm like, wow. I mean, it's not like I'm even a religious person, but that was a pretty basic tenet of what you did and said every time you went to church. And we went fairly often when I was a kid. And through my, adult years, you go to weddings and christenings and things of that nature, and you hear that as well. So I've probably heard this hundreds of times in my life, and it absolutely was not anything to do with debts or debtors. There's no way.
It just sounds weird. It doesn't even make sense. Now, even it's hard for me to be in a biblical scholar degree right now, because when I try to talk to other Christians about this stuff, they get, they think kind of the work that I'm doing here is a little bit blasphemous. But to be honest, I'm really just trying to get to the truth. And if anything, they should be concerned in trying to do the research themselves. There are some Christians in the Mandela effect community that are really trying to get to the bottom of this, but a lot of them just simply believe this is what's known as the Great Deception, where we start to be deceived but with our eyes. But this is deeper than with our eyes now. This is stuff, like you said, that's like muscle memory. You know it in your heart. How many times do you say the Lord's Prayer? It's just something that just rolls off your tongue.
Right.
And when things like this that are really meaningful, like the Lord's Prayer, that's a meaningful thing to Christians. And when something like that changes, that's a really big deal.
Right.
You know, and that sounds like something nefarious. And that's why I do believe there is possibly some nefarious manipulation that has something to do with this. But then hopefully the reason we're all being able to see this now is because of a divine intervention of a more positive nature, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many of these that we could go on for hours about this.
Oh, yeah.
But we're coming to the point where we have to start cutting it off here. But I wanted to ask you before we got to the end here, because this is kind of a question that I've had about this, and it's a tough one because it's I don't know how you would look at this, but for example, in this kind of field, in the paranormal field, if you have a haunting, you go into a house and you say this house is haunted, and you go in there and you gather your data, and either you find tangible data or you don't. But if you don't, then the best that a skeptic can do is say that you didn't find any data. I don't see anything that proves to me that this is haunted. With this type of thing, with the Mandela effect, when you have someone who's a skeptic of this, and you're saying that, for example, the Berenstain Bears used to be with an EI instead of an A, they can now, instead of just saying I don't believe you, they can now pull any number of resources and go, look, it's right here. And
Yes.
so you're basically not only fighting against the bias of them not believing you, you're fighting against the bias of them literally showing you proof of their side of the equation. So how do you go? Like, that's going to be a tough thing to battle against.
It's been really hard. I'm telling you, this is my third book that I've published, and this was the 1,000-pound book. This was the hardest book to write because I really wanted to stay as unbiased as possible throughout the whole thing and really, really make it. I'm a Virgo, so I'm like super research based in general. I'm really analytical and very organized. And so for me, it was, I'm not someone who's just going to write a conspiracy theory book based off a bunch of random ideas. I had to sit with this. It literally took me 1 year. This book just came out about a month or two ago. And I literally, since day one of getting that email in July or August or September of last year, have spent hours upon hours upon hours trying to find the hard evidence, because I know that the only way you basically can't prove somebody's memory, but you can prove physical items. And in the Mandela effect community, we call this the search for residual evidence.
Okay.
So I've become an expert in what is known as finding residual evidence. And that is just strictly to, once we have the effect, once I know that there's a good majority of people that all agree that something's changed, then I go on a basic full research manhunt. I'm Sherlock Holmes. And I will scrub old newspaper articles. You can go to newspapers.com. That's a great resource to find, like things from the past. I will be trying to not really use Wikipedia too much. I use it as a landing page, but I check all the external links. I try to find random ebooks, going to a library, getting anything. Facebook has been really helpful for me because I've joined a lot of these groups that are Mandela effect groups on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so I can literally, if I have an effect that feels really resonant to me, I can just go and post in one of these groups and say, hey guys, I remember that Mona Lisa never smiled, but suddenly I've had 20 people send me, emails in the past week saying that now Mona Lisa is smiling in the original Mona Lisa painting. What do you guys remember? And does anybody have any proof or any before and after? Have any of you ever seen her in person, taken a photograph of the original? Have you been to the Louvre? Whatever.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I will just get a flood of what we call residual evidence. I will either find it or other people in the community will send it my way because it's so real to us that our community is so strong because we really, really know this is something big, and so we help each other out. And that's really the best way to be able to prove that this isn't just what they call false memory, or what Wikipedia even defines this, the Mandela effect, as confabulation, which is a word that basically means a bunch of people misremembering things the wrong way. So they're just telling us we're wrong from the minute you land on Wikipedia, from the beginning of it. And Mona Lisa smiling is a real Mandela effect. I actually haven't put that in the book yet, but I did make a video about it.
Yeah.
And it's freaking people out big time, because she never smiled, and now she is smiling.
Wow. So, what is your opinion of all this? What do you think is going on? What is your best guess?
Well, there are so many theories at this point that basically the end of the book, or chapter 7 of the book, I had to make a whole chapter on theories. Because at this point, there's just so many people that are finding out about this, that there's a ton of people coming up with all their own theories. Now, I'm the first person to admit, from the beginning to the end of even my own book, that I don't know who or what or why, who's causing it or what's causing it or why they're causing it. But I do, of course, have some theories. Now, the top theory that I honestly have is that this has something to do with different realities, or what we call different dimensions, kind of collapsing together and merging together. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't necessarily say that we're living on a parallel reality and that our old Earth is somewhere else and we're all a bunch of different people, or a bunch of, doppelganger versions of ourselves are living on our old Earth and now we're on theirs. But I do believe that that dimensions are real. So if there's multiple dimensions that exist, and let's say as a collective consciousness, we start to grow and change and really grow as a species and start to learn more, then we're going to kind of start merging together with maybe some higher or lower dimensions that haven't reached the level we have yet, the level of understanding we have, or maybe even some lower dimensions that have a lot to learn and can benefit from being on a planet full of people who maybe are a little more compassionate or a little more understanding. So I believe that we may be actually going through a kind of merging of different dimensions collapsing into one. Now, that's something so theoretical that it can't be proven, but for me, I feel like that's part of it.
Right.
But that's not really the number one thing that the rest of the world thinks. Now, the rest of the world in the Mandela Effect community, they got one main facility, really, that they want to blame this on. And that is the facility known as CERN, CERN. It is a scientific research facility located in Geneva, Switzerland. I don't know if that's ever come up on any of your podcasts before.
Yeah, we've talked about that briefly, probably for the reason you're about to get into, because there's some shady things going on, according to a lot of people out that way.
Yes. And the reason CERN plays a big role in this is that CERN were the one who searched for what is known as the God particle. And they use their machines at CERN to create essentially a God particle. Basically, they're playing God.
Right.
Now, when this happened was around 2011, and that's honestly when I had my spiritual awakening and when I went to school and everything in my life started changing. And that's also approximately about 10 years ago. And it also seems to be around the same time that a lot of these Mandela effects started happening. Now, what people believe CERN are doing is they believe that they're using their scientific technology to open up portals to other dimensions. That they're masking it as this scientific facility where, we're just trying to, find antimatter and God particles, and this is all we're doing. But there's a lot of people that used to work for CERN that are kind of not working for them anymore, and they're leaking little hints that possibly what CERN have been doing is not only using their abilities to open up portals to other dimensions, but that they're using it in tandem with something known as the D-Wave quantum computer to essentially time travel. So if you remember Back to the Future, of course,
Yeah.
that if you time travel and if you go back in time and if you change something,
Right.
you will change the present and the future.
The butterfly effect, right?
Exactly. Butterfly effect is another great term for the Mandela effect. It's the same type of thing. So those tend to be kind of what the community are really leaning towards. I believe that as well. And I again, I'm really open-minded. It could be CERN, it could be time travel, it could be parallel realities. It could have something to do with the polar shifts and losing the North Pole, the planet changing. There's the whole Nibiru Planet X theory. And then, of course, the religious aspect of it, which is some people believe we're in the end times. And this is the rapture. This is the great deception. We are seeing kind of Satan pulling all of his last minute tricks to either divide us by our memories or divide us by, our history. Anyway, just like the Tower of Babel, where they essentially tried to build a tower to get literally up to God when they didn't know he was living within them the whole time. Right. And at that moment, an angel was sent down for all of our language to be confused. And that's the time of Babylon. And so we could be seeing like another time where they confused all of their language back in the day, but maybe now in this modern time, they're trying to confuse our memories to separate us all and to divide us. Yeah. It's not even so far away from like the political stuff that we've seen out there. I mean, look what happened in this last election, total division of the world.
Right.
And so I think there really could be just a little bit of everything going on. But to be honest, I feel it's nefarious. And I feel that a divine power, whether you call him God or the creator, or whether you don't even believe in that, if you just believe in nature, someone out there is trying to correct it. And I do think in the end, we're going to get to the answers. And I think we're going to live in a better world by the end of this. I think there is a really hidden positive thing happening underneath this all.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. One of the things that we talk about oftentimes on the show, we deal a lot with consciousness and non-local consciousness. How the idea of brain equals consciousness is a materialistic fallacy. And that you essentially exist outside of your physical reality. You remember the old movie with Bruce Willis? I forget the name of it right now. But it was where he basically was, people were living as avatars of themselves. And the world was populated by these like animatronic robots, and actual people were in these pods in their house, and they were living vicariously through these best versions of themselves that were in the world. Remember this movie like 10 years ago?
Yeah, I do. I can't think of the name of it either, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh, you're really onto something here.
That is what I tend to think, and we talk about it a lot on the show, that is going on, where we as quote unquote people, spirits call it that, are essentially living as in these bodies as avatars. And if that's the case, you combine that with the fact that there's the butterfly effect, and where every time anything changes, that there's a theory out there that a billion different realities exist, and every time you lift a finger, you're creating a new reality. So is it possible that your spirit, your singular spirit, is jumping the track? You live in this reality today, reality 1, and then you, for whatever reason, jump the track to reality 2, which is very, very similar to this reality with very few exceptions. But those exceptions are what we're talking about here today.
You nailed it, I think. And that's why it's so hard to pinpoint what this is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can notice that some days I will feel like I'm literally on a different planet, and I will be able to tell even just by the energy of the people that I interact with. Have you noticed how kind of negative people in general have become as of late?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot less than it used to be. And again, I blame technology for a lot of this. I also didn't really touch on AI and artificial technology, but I feel like that has a huge thing to do with this.
Right.
But essentially what you just explained too about how we could be avatars, there was one more really big theory I didn't touch on, And that's that many people believe that. Remember when the world was supposed to end in 2012?
Right.
And we were all supposed to be hit by a meteor or whatever.
Right.
Well, there's a really, really big part of the Mandela effect community that believe that we did all die in 2012, that the Earth was destroyed in 2012, and that some type of technology, whether they be Anunnaki or beings that we don't understand or something outside of our understanding, knew this was going to happen to us. And what they did was they essentially preserved all of our consciousness, and then what they did was they made a mirrored reality that looked just like our reality. They did their best, the best they could to kind of copy it, and then they planted us all here in this virtual reality that is essentially a copy of the Earth that we once knew. And this could be why everything looks pretty much the same, but if you get the microscope and you look a little bit deeper, there's some really significant things that are not making us feel at home here.
So kind of like a cosmic version of Noah's Ark.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Interesting.
And how would we know? I mean, and these are all things, again, that how do you even prove any of this stuff? So that's why I really tried to focus when I wrote the book on as much of the actual research as I could. And it's so full of links. Every single little comment I make has got a link that'll send you somewhere. Particularly if you buy the ebook, it'll link you right to the videos.
Right.
I've got so much proof and what we call evidence, at least for the things that I've covered in the first book, that it's pretty much undeniable. I mean, there's no real what you call quote unquote opinions in this book. I tried to get to the bottom of the facts of what is changing. And if enough people get together and say, hey, how do you remember the Lord's Prayer? And hey, how do you remember, are you an astronomer? Do you remember where we're located in the Milky Way galaxy? Because that was another really big one. We used to be located in what was known as the Sagittarius arm of the Milky Way galaxy. And now if you check our current stellariums, we are located in the literal exact opposite side of the Milky Way galaxy in an area known as the Orion Spur. And I even have a link of Neil deGrasse Tyson, the famous physicist, on a video, which is linked in this book, that you will find of him proving that we were in the Sagittarius arm several years ago on one of his podcasts.
Wow.
And now we're not. So that makes the parallel reality people get really excited. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I imagine it would. All right, well, we have to start wrapping up here, but I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been a really interesting conversation, and this is definitely a topic that we need to dig into further. If anybody wanted to find your work, get your book, your YouTube videos, where would they go to do all that?
Well, they can just basically go to my website. It's StashaEriksen.com, and that's StashaEriksen.com. It's kind of a landing pad where I have everything that I do. I do some different services. I do some house blessing, curse removals, ministry work for people. A lot of things like that is besides just writing books. But you can find all of the books that I've written there. I've written books about MK Ultra and different conspiracy theories, and I have like a video blog on there where you can find all my different YouTube videos. The other thing too, if you go onto the books tab of my page, you'll see that I actually have a GoFundMe page there for the Mandela Effect Volume 2. Because all of my work is self-published. I think my books are too controversial for a publishing company to want to back them up yet. So I have to keep doing these kind of fully out of pocket. So I also have a GoFundMe page on the books tab of my website where if people want to just go and donate $1, $5, whatever, it will all go towards like the formatting, editing, research, and putting together volume 2 of the book. So if volume 1 really touches you, I would really appreciate anybody's support in helping this research project to keep going. Because there's definitely something much deeper going on here, and I didn't even tip the iceberg with you here today, Rick. There is so much more that this just is absolutely, without a doubt, gone beyond a couple of people just misremembering Nelson Mandela's death. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, we'll definitely have to have you back on then if if you have more information. We'd love to hear it.
Oh, I had a list of like 100 things here, and I think we talked about like 5 of them. So I'd be happy to do a follow up with you anytime. It's just too hard to just kind of wrap this stuff up into a nutshell because it's so detailed and intricate. And so I do think it's something that has to be revisited again and again and again until the whole world knows. And if people just get on there and start sharing my videos and sharing, making their own videos about it, the more the world knows. I don't want credit for this. I just want to get answers. And I just really want to help humanity find out what's going on. Because if our reality has changed, we need to understand why. And we need to know what we can do about it.
Absolutely. All right, well, thanks, Stasha, for coming on, and we will definitely be talking to you again soon.
Wonderful, Rick. It was my pleasure, and I'll be...